To be our best, we need to stay up to date on the latest and greatest. That includes being equipped with prime tools and gear. That's where ShieldBox comes in. It's a monthly subscription box designed specifically for law enforcement professionals. Each month, you'll get a curated box of duty gear and supplies from industry leaders. Sign up today at theshieldbox.com and use code BLUEGRIT to save $10 on your first box.
Why do you want to be in law enforcement? And it seems like a simple question, and a lot of people would give a simple answer. But if you dive deep into that, it does point out to people's expectations, their motivations, and that's a thread that can run through the rest of that interview process.
Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. Hey, ladies and gents, welcome back to another episode of Blue Grit Radio. This is your host, Eric, and today I'm joined by Dr. Jena. Dr. Jena, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So I've been following your content for a long time, and it's really good for a couple of reasons. One, it's really clean, and I think back to, I still do it honestly, like where I just do like a screenshot and it's pretty sloppy, but it's very well produced and very high quality. So if you're not following Dr. Jena, you need to do that now when you're not driving.
Thanks for the compliment. It does take a little bit of work to get some good social media content out there, but I enjoy doing it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I've been a fan of your content. We've been following each other on social media and sharing some posts and things like that for quite some time. And it was even some time ago that I heard you on, shout out to James Gearing, Behind the Shield, where you're on there with Dr. Brooke, who's been on the show here. And to that point, like you're always in my sphere of like in the back of my mind, but I didn't know if you did podcast interviews. And so a long time ago, reached out, and it's just been rescheduling, but I'm super excited. I mean, we're both busy people. You're traveling and training, I believe, quite a bit. So yeah, again, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm pumped that we could finally make this happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to be diving into, this is for the applicants, so the pre-hire, but we're going to be diving into like the Psych Eval. But first, I want to ask you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, Dr. Jena Casas, I'm a licensed clinical and police and public safety psychologist. I practice primarily in Nevada. This is my home state. This is where I'm from. But I am licensed through Psych to provide other services to people in those participating states. And there's over 30 of them. I won't list them out for anybody, but you can look it up if you look up Psych. And I basically provide different services at different levels. So I provide organizational consultation and training. That's for the agency side of things, leadership. And then I provide the individual services, therapy, critical incident services, things like that. My passion is in the training side of things and in the wellness visit side of things, because that gets me out of the office. I, just like the people that I serve, tend to not do very well behind a desk. So if I can get out of the office, I'm happy.
Yeah, nice. I love it. That resonates with so many people that are in this type of work or ancillary work. And shout out, you've been posting your workout, like you've been like another, I think, I forget the phrase, like another one done or another one down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Has
Yeah.
that been like a recent resurgence, or is that just kind of like an accountability thing?
It's interesting. It is a bit of an accountability thing. I'm not a big new year, new me kind of person, but I have been focusing a lot more on fitness, and I want to be able to really, coach people and train people from an authentic space. So I'm holding myself accountable. I'm going to get in the gym even on the hard days. And I've had some feedback from people saying, man, I needed to see that. That got my butt in the gym. So it's keeping me going.
Yeah, I love it too. And it is that little nod, and it's like iron sharpens iron. And I feel like, I'm in this space with folks like you, and then you got it in. So I was like, well, what's my excuse, right? And so oddly sunny Pacific Northwest day, although it is freezing outside, like I think I'm going to get the bike out and check those tires and actually get out and do something I haven't done in quite some time because it's winter.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, I love it. Especially when so many mental health practitioners are recognizing like you got to walk the walk. And if you're telling people, hey, physical activity, exercise is going to help you. Like,
Yeah.
what better way than to also demonstrate and model that behavior?
For sure. And I think for me too, a lot of the work I do is on the road. So that has challenged me to put into practice some of the things I tell people, which is adapt.
Mm-hmm.
If you're used to being a day shifter and then all of a sudden you're switched to graveyard and you can't go to the gym that you like to go to, adapt. So for me, it's the hotel gyms or
Yep.
getting off on the side of the road and walking around, just getting something in.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And, although this is geared a bit towards new applicants and those coming in, I'm sure the downloads kind of speak for themselves, a lot of the applicant stuff. And I know not everyone is listening, just an applicant, but there are so many takeaways for those that are in the industry or not even first responder where they're getting these little tidbits injected in. But yeah, I'm just going to, without further ado, we'll just get into it. So, with the pre-hire deals, like being a prior recruiter, recruiting sergeant, hiring sergeant, it's one of those things where I I felt comfortable just saying like a super vague thing, which was that like they do some profiling stuff. They want to look at your background, they want to chat with you. So there's some questionnaires. Don't freak out, just present it as yourself. But even people that I have like a deeper relationship with, they're like, well, seriously, I feel a little uncomfortable. I'm like, well, for sure. But
Yeah.
then I'd offer something like kind of intangible, which is like, well, every cop has to do it. So just do it. Like
Yeah.
less stressful, I think, for most than the polygraph, which we've talked about that in a prior episode. But yeah, so starting with just like the pre-hire psych evals, like let's start with the what. I think most people can see why, but we'll get into the weeds a little bit there too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in order to talk about what a pre-employment psychological evaluation is, you really have to think about what it's underneath that context. And like you said, it's part of the hiring and selection process.
Hmm.
So I haven't really heard too many people bucket the idea that we should have some sort of selection. Like
No, yeah.
you have to buy into this concept that not everyone is a good match for the law enforcement profession. And if you do, which I do, I buy into that idea, then it makes sense that we would come up with some sort of criteria by which we can evaluate and then deselect. And it really is more of a deselection process than a selection process. How can we figure out which candidates are most likely to introduce liability for the agency, which people are most likely to perform poorly, and ultimately be a bad investment where they may not retain for a long period of time.
Hmm.
So if you buy into that idea, not everyone's a good match, and we need to be able to sort through and have a larger pool of who's actually going to perform well and represent the badge in a positive way, I think that makes sense. So a psychological evaluation, the pre-employment version of it, is just one component, part of a lot of other things, like you've said, the polygraph and other things that go into that. And for anybody that has not been through this process yet, audience members, it's going to vary state by state and provider by provider a little bit. Assessment in psychology, it's an ever growing field and it's constantly changing. So as you and I are recording this, some of the things I may say are going to be generalities and they may already be changing.
All right, I'm really excited to share with you the new Blue Grit Police Testing and Hiring Guide that's live on the website. Really, this is the culmination of everything I've learned about police testing from the time I came in myself and had to figure out trial by fire what it was that agencies wanted, at the same time, how to showcase my best version of myself. In my guide, I go in everything about the hiring landscape right now, how to develop your mindset, what to expect, and how to show up. And then going into the test itself. So written, physical components, interviews, everything that we're looking for there, the background, what that entails, polygraph, psych eval, medical, what these things all are, and then how you can make sure that you are showing up to be effective so you're not wasting your time, stress, money. Again, you can find that at bluegritwellness.com. Go to the shop. So it's bluegritwellness.com/shop.
So
Sure.
just
Yeah.
keep that in mind. If you say, I listened to that podcast episode and I didn't have to do that thing, it's going to be really specific to your area. But in general, the pre-employment psychological evaluation is going to come way later in the process. It happens after a conditional offer of employment, and there's specific reasons for that. It's a little bit in the weeds, but it has to do with the ADA and their definition of a medical test.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time that you've gotten to the pre-employment psychological evaluation, most candidates are going to be in a space where they're already offered that conditional offer. And now it's just really digging in and finding out if there's any components there, again, that would increase liability, indicate that somebody's not going to do well. We don't want to set them up for failure, or they're not going to retain.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really great crash course. I think everyone will recognize cop, not cop, never want to be a cop, love cops, hate cops. Everyone would recognize that there is an absurd, it's an interesting word I suppose I'm using, but I've said this before. It's an absurd amount of power that just to put willy nilly in the hands of anybody, right? And so
Yeah.
we know this job is not most jobs, and it is an absurd amount of stress. And you got to have your life together, right? And you got to be actively working on getting your life together in the places where it's not ideal, right? And so that's not to say everyone's like perfect and super squared away when they come in, but at least from the hiring perspective, when you zoom out, those that have misstepped or mistaked or what have you, like in life, it doesn't a lot of times it doesn't preclude you from doing this job. It's just more of what have you recognized and like what routines and like, kind of guardrails and how are you running your life now, not how are you running your life like 10 years ago, right?
Yes.
Absent some large things. Um, but yeah, even as I say that there are folks that are going to benefit who are coming into the process listening to this, I won't be surprised when other people that are either command staff or recruiting work groups are listening in and kind of taking notes on maybe how they utilize this information for a hiring decision, but also you mentioned like providers vary. Absolutely, right? That's the same for anything. So,
Mhm.
I do want to share like, my own hiring experience and the same doc. I'm not gonna put him on blast, but the same doc did my like post OIS eval, and both times I was like, this guy's Looney Tunes himself, or he's like playing these mind games to try to see like what I would say if I would say anything like super uncouth. But either way, I felt like no confidence in him, and I shared that back when I was in the agency after the OIS, and we ended up changing providers because my thing was like, man, like if I needed help, this guy, there's no way he could tell, and
Yeah.
there's no way I would trust him to provide that. So, not
Yeah.
to tangent too hard.
No, I think what you're pointing out is something that I hear from a lot of people that experience it feels awkward. And psychologists kind of get this rap a little bit, like we're in our own little bubble and everyone has these ideas about, you're going to do these tests and show us pictures and you can read our minds. And there's all these little tropes about it.
Hmm.
And I think when you really spend time, sort of like what we're doing on a podcast, and you get the chance to answer questions, it makes the process feel less magical and creepy
Yeah,
and really
mystical. Yeah.
uncertain. Yeah.
Hmm.
A lot of what that has to do with, and we can get deeper into this maybe at a later section of the conversation, but it has to do with the fact that when you are in law enforcement, you're pretty used to things being black and white, or at least you want them to be.
Yeah.
And a lot of the assessment domain in psychology, things aren't on the nose. So, in a pre employment psychological evaluation, you may fill out some forms that are on the nose, like a personal history questionnaire. I'm sure you remember filling out something like this. It's pretty standard practice.
Hmm.
The questions are things like, have you ever been arrested? It's pretty clear what we're asking when we ask that and what the answer, maybe what it would need to be or what you would want it to be in order to have a higher chance of getting hired. That's not so much the case on some of the other measures that we use, things like the personality questionnaires or tests of cognitive ability. Those seem a little bit more strange. We might have you doing puzzles. We might ask questions like, do you ever go to the movies alone? And applicants often will say things like, what the hell does that have to do with anything?
Right. Right.
It's less on the nose, but when we use the research methodology and statistics to put these things together and make these hiring decisions, we're looking at trends and patterns and all sorts of things that do map onto deeper categories. Things like all related to job performance, but integrity, timeliness, time management, ability to conform to chain of command. There's some legitimate stuff that we're looking at based on these answers. It's just on the face of it, it doesn't feel that way. And then people are a little less sure of how they quote unquote should answer.
Yeah.
So it makes
Yeah.
it feel awkward.
Absolutely. And I'm trying to process it, like not overthinking the audience because everyone is literally extremely different. Like there are people that you've tested or you're gonna test where you have like a higher, lack of better words, like a higher risk you're a higher risk hire. But even then, before people are like, man, like now I'm really freaking out how to answer the thing. My feedback, and of course I want your insight too, is like, just like everything in the hiring process, you should be honest, right? And also, like most things in the hiring process, you be thoughtful, but don't overthink it. Because if you're a prime overthinker like me, you have paralysis analysis, and then you're getting in the weeds, you're getting in your own head, and then you're getting in your way. And so, even somebody that's like, man, I go to the movies by myself, but not all the time. What does that say about me? Like, it doesn't say anything by itself, but
Exactly.
maybe with like 20 or 30 other questions all like meshed together, you may see how someone that goes to the movies by themselves is like, I don't know, I suppose like a bit more introverted, like not going with a group. But you also may see like with like 15, 20 other questions, maybe they show some antisocial tendencies. And that's just me like spitballing here.
Yeah. I love where your brain's going with this because that is the piece of this. It's just one piece of data, the pre-employment psychological evaluation, although it's parts incorporated with tons of different batteries of tests, is one data point. And I often will tell people when you look at each of the components separately, it tells a bit of a story. So the general components, again, these can vary by provider to provider, whoever's hired to do these things. Generally, it's going to include a personal history questionnaire. That is the thing that I consider the quick and dirty version of give me a synopsis of your life so that if I was to then go into the interview and interview you, I have some points that I may want to follow up on. For example, some questions in that may be things like, have you ever been arrested? Have you ever filed for bankruptcy? It's not that on the face of those questions, you're going to be deselected, but they are opportunities for a provider, depending on how you answer them, yes or no, to follow up. If you say, no, I've never been arrested, I might ask in an interview something like, do you have any legal history? Right. So it allows me a space to expand that answer.
Mm-hmm.
If you say, yes, I have been arrested, then I can say, tell me more about that. Again, it allows me to narrow into that area. Same with bankruptcy or any other issue. It allows you to expand or contract based on, wanting to know more about those things. But that personal history questionnaire is just a very quick and dirty, let's look into all the possible aspects of your life and get sensed into that. Then the other components on their own are going to give us more information about how somebody behaviorally, emotionally, and psychologically tends to be. And this is really good if you think about it on the applicant side of things. We want to be able to figure out how to make this person succeed. If the agency is going to invest resources and wants to retain this person for 20 to 30 years, wherever they're at in their career contracts, we want to make sure that that person's going to do well. So it behooves the applicant to be honest and to point things out exactly as they are, just to say, here's who I am, so that the agency can meet those demands. If it turns out the person needs more supervision to be able to succeed, that would be a good thing to know.
Yeah.
If they lie and dance around it and now they're failing because they need more supervision, but they said that they were good and don't need to be micromanaged, that's a problem. So I think it's helpful for people to recognize that honesty is a good policy to go into this. But also, when people aren't as honest, it can mask needs that the agency on the face of it maybe would have been able to meet had they known that.
Yeah, yeah, that's so well put. And information is power, and like how we utilize it or using it appropriately can be, kind of called intelligence, right? So now we have more than information; we have like applied intelligence. And so, from the hiring perspective, again, if you're wary about this stuff, like you're already putting it in your personal history questionnaire. I hope, like, you know, knock knock, bang bang, like listen, like put it all down, but this can absolutely help you. So it's all offering a different perspective. And
Mhm.
so I've already admitted, like, and I think any responsible, I suppose, hiring person will admit, like, the hiring process is subjective because we are all humans analyzing this data. However, in an effort to be more objective, right, that's why we have standardized testing. We have standardized physical, written, like the pre-hire questionnaire that you're talking about, right? So there's the the personal history questionnaire that you may do through your background process. A psych doc may get that thing and may have all these other questions that are kind of in parallel or more in depth, right? And then there's the interview component that is very common. You may have like a hiring sergeant or a background investigator that's like, man, this is a lot of stuff. I don't really know how I feel about this candidate. And you could have a doc go either way, right? Offering their professional opinion based on all their schooling and all their clinical practice, right? Where they say, I totally see that. Here's my take on it. I think that there are all these, you're very responsible in recognizing these things. However, like, it's not like a no-go. I would just make sure that you are aware of these things. And a lot of times there's some overlap. And I suppose from my perspective of being a hiring sergeant, a lot of times there was validating perspective either way. Like, I felt apprehensive about a candidate, and then the doc was like, me too. And I'm like, okay, cool. Next, right? Whereas like, hey, I have these concerns, but I see a lot of potential. And they're like, yeah, me too. And then it made me feel better about moving forward and bringing that to the bosses. So again, if you're playing it all close to the vest and you're very limited in what you provide, especially to that point of like a background investigator and your psych doc, then you're preventing them from getting that more information to know your specific context and your story.
Yeah, and I think you spoke to this point pretty well, as too, with the honesty piece. We don't expect anybody to be perfect. Like that's not possible.
No.
And the
Yeah.
squeaky clean, sometimes that can even have questions.
Mm-hmm.
What is it about this candidate where there's nothing? So we actually expect people to have lived a life and have some sort of experiences and have some parts that we're going to dive into. That in and of itself doesn't mean that somebody's going to be disqualified. And for a lot of people, because they don't get the chance to see that report that the psychologist provides, I think that can also be anxiety producing. There's only a limited number of people in the agency that can view that. Just to clarify what's written in that report, it is a summary of all of the tests that are conducted in the interview
Mm-hmm.
that's conducted. And at the end, again, depending on state by state, provider and guidelines, things like that, it can differ. Generally, the provider is going to provide some sort of a recommendation, either recommend, not recommend, or a risk level, low, medium, high risk. And it is a recommendation. So the agency can decide how much weight they want to put into that, if any at all. Now, if they have this recommendation, let's say it says not recommend, and then an agency goes against that, on their end of things, being able to document why they're doing that is helpful, because you don't want to have a future problem on your hands, right? And then be responsible for negligence. So the more components you put into the hiring process, the more that you have to consider all of them together. You can't cherry pick pieces and say, well, we didn't like that one, so we're just going to, not utilize that. And I've not seen agencies do this, by the way, but just to point out, depending on who's in your audience listening. The testing, just one more note on this, because I didn't point this out. In addition to the personal history questionnaire, there's also tests of cognitive ability in addition to the personality test. And when we talked about being honest and just doing your best, there really isn't a way to prepare for this kind of stuff anyways, which I know makes people feel a little bit maybe helpless. Like, so I'm just going to go in blind. Yeah, you're going to go in blind. And this is stuff that's in you, and instinctually you're going to respond to it. When I say do your best, I mean present exactly as you show up. These tests are meant to figure out how you think, how you learn, how you problem solve. And because we're trying to make recommendations for job performance, that information is helpful to tell us things like, how may you be supervised? How may you train? How are you going to think about things as they're constantly adapting and changing in a fast-paced environment? What are your behavioral tendencies under stress? Do you pay attention to detail? Do you lose that focus? Or do you stay organized? Do you have a sense of time? So you just showing up and being you is exactly what we're looking for in those tests, so that we can map that onto the work environment and figure out, is that a good fit?
Yeah. Yeah. You said a lot of things, and just to connect and, I suppose connect some dots and summarize for some folks, just presenting as yourself it's really the best way that, we can make sure it's a good fit.
Mm-hmm.
And even what you said there, and I'm going to try to remember how you said it, but yeah, not knowing what's going to come can create some degree of anxiety and this like kind of edgy unpreparedness feeling. But that's literally what the job becomes, right? Like, so that's like, patrol's like a box of chocolates. You don't know what call you're going to get. And also, like, the neighborhood dispute could be something grossly different than what you think it is, or the fight could be absolutely like 180 different thing. Like, the fight is actually like just a boisterous, like a friendly party where there's no enforcement action. So you never know, and you have to be prepared for everything. So whereas my younger self would absolutely be in that column of like, that's super nerve wracking. And I still contend with that, right? But when I can, and I realize like not knowing can also create not knowing and knowing you're not going to know is going to create that level of peace of mind. So just release, yourself to the process. And there's so many things that you just can't control in this job or this career field, but there's a lot you can, right? So that's just keep working on yourself, work on your fitness, work on your mental decompression, like your stress management, all these things, your relationships, job skills. And then this thing is just like, just show up your best way, like your honest, organic best way.
Yeah, show up your honest, organic, best way. Eat a good meal before you go in. Accept that the process is going to feel a little bit awkward.
Hmm.
When you're given an opportunity to expand on answers, do that's your chance. The psychologist wants to know. Tell me more. Give me that context so that I can understand how this thing plays out for you. And on the stuff that maybe feels a little icky, like if you have a spot in your background that you're like, oh, I really wish that wasn't there, that's a good sign.
Mm.
Explain that feeling. Talk about that period of time in life. Talk about how things have changed for you. It's very different when somebody has insight. Oh, that was a moment in time that I didn't like versus what's the big deal. So explain that if you're having those feelings. The psychologist is not your friend, right? I want to be clear on that part, but they're also not your adversary. They're there to
Hmm.
try to help make a neutral, objective decision, recommendation rather, to help the agency make the decision. So
Yep.
utilize them as a tool.
Yep. And if you are standoffish and you cannot like open up, then that it's going to hurt you. And then what it appears to be, and you may not be this way, but if you wrap your head around it, what it appears to be is that you are standoffish to reveal yourself. And why should we be concerned? Why should we be suspicious that you're unable to open up? Or do you have trouble opening up or communicating with peers in the future or the public who is literally taking up every possible form and personality? Like, do you not get along with certain types of people? Are you unable to show some level of empathy or connection? And so, again, not to make people freak out about how they're presenting, but just again, just be you and just relaxed as much as practical. Um, you said something earlier. I want to cut back to like a type of candidate, right? So,
Mhm.
a type of candidate that maybe has either made no mistakes apparently in life or never stepped off the straight and narrow. Um, and I want to make sure because some candidates may be I don't want to tag you like a Boy Scout, Girl Scout, but I'll just use that term, right? But you've never kind of dabbled in the anything that could be scrutinized, and that's not. We're not saying I'm saying that's not like a bad thing. Don't make stuff up of like how you're like some rebel that's not there. But it is helpful. Can you expand a little bit more on that of like what people may consider, what hiring agencies may consider? Because whether or not like Doc Jenna says this, like there's so many cops that just hear that, and then I'll just introduce it. Like some people are like, man, you never been in a fight or close to fisticuffs. Like I don't know about you, right? And that's like
Mhm.
kind of an old school thing, but at the same time, like what they're getting at is like you never had conflict, you never like really truly evaluated whether a rule or makes sense or not to you. And just people that don't know cops, that might sound really weird that we're like the enforcers, but again, like going back to earlier in the conversation, it's not super black and white. Like the job is the world is gray. And so applying this in a mindful sense that makes sense for the dynamic circumstances and every situation is different and trying to apply that as responsibly as you can, like that is nuance. That's like really sticky sometimes.
Super sticky. And you pointed this out earlier, with just the fact that we need criteria for hiring and selection because the powers, I think you used the word absurd, like the powers are so absurd, life and
Hmm.
liberty. That's huge.
Yeah.
When you're looking at hiring an applicant, really the blemishes in their background or the lack of blemishes speak to experience. Agencies across the US right now have had recruitment and retention problems for several years, for a while, but definitely more recently. It's been a conversation just all of the time. And so where are they looking? Younger. It's going to be more and more common for agencies to have people coming into their academies and maybe celebrating their 21st birthday at the same time. So we're looking at a younger applicant pool in some respects, and that means they've had less opportunities to have these experiences. It's not necessarily, like you said, a bad thing for people to not have had moments that they have to be able to explain. But what the opportunity is for an applicant is to figure out how they can gain some sense of life experience to prepare them for the job. So think about the job. Think about what types of calls for service if you're in a patrol function or even in a detention function when you're spending your days with people there, your full days with people there. How are you going to relate to them? If you've never been in any relationship yourself, what are you going to be able to say or do to make a situation involving a domestic disturbance better? How are you going to de-escalate that or relate to somebody in that? Not saying that you have to go and find a girlfriend or a boyfriend and get that experience, but this is just the thought process that we're looking at. Is if you don't have those experiences, you're going to feel really incompetent in those moments until you gain mastery, and that's going to take just years to do so. So can you find opportunities before you apply for the job to help you gain a little bit of experience in that? It doesn't have to be, like you said, don't go find the fight. Don't go make the blemish if it doesn't
Don't
exist.
start a relationship just to purposely crash and burn it, just to be like, yeah, I've been through breakups too. Like, that's really hard.
Yeah, but just know that when you come in green, you're going to be green. So where can you gather information? Can you go and take a course at a community college? If you want a little bit more life experience, can you volunteer at some sort of organization and understand humanity at a little bit of a deeper level because you haven't been there? If you haven't moved out of mom and dad's house yet, so you don't understand roommate, landlord, tenant, any sorts of stuff that could possibly happen, maybe that's a nudge to try and go out and explore the world a little bit in some way. And it's really just making sure that the applicants themselves are ready for the job. This is, like you said, not like most other jobs. It does require people to be a jack of all trades. And so if you don't have that experience, you're definitely going to gain it on the job. But in some respects, would like to look for people that have had a little bit of life experience if possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've shared so many times, I was a young hire. I was 21 when I got hired. And I do reflect a lot on like how immature I was. However, in context, for a 21-year-old, I was not. And so not like my agency was irresponsible. Like, I understand why I was hired, and I would, it sounds a certain way, but I would hire me too, especially when like everything that I had considered, like I didn't get into a ton of trouble, but I certainly made a lot of mistakes and just didn't get caught. And I was very honest about those things, whether it was, teenage years or in college. That was more my acting out phase, was college. Being around a lot of alcohol and not partaking in drugs, but being around it, right? And having reflections. So I think for the younger candidates, what I want to impress is sometimes our younger candidates don't even recognize how much they've been through or how to contextualize that adversity. They've kind of just been through it. But until you take a moment and you reflect, you actually learn the lesson better. Like, I didn't have a super smooth growing up, and that did inform how I look at family structures and how I try to be someone with strong values, and what I try to put out in the world with my relationships, like my friendships and the people I'm involved with, right? So there was that. I was also going to school. I was also in a fraternity, which had a ton of conflict. And I volunteered for roles within the fraternity, which was to, yes, enforce some of our rules, put people on social pro, like have a judicial board where people can, hey, you've acted out too much. You can't drink now. That's not fun stuff to talk about, but it's conflict and being a treasurer and telling your buddies they have to pay the bills or they can't go to the social function. Again, like, someone from the outside might be like, okay, yeah, it does sound like you're kind of an enforcer type and you have to hold accountability for people you deeply care about. So that blends in, right? And I worked a ton, like running a painting franchise. So it wasn't just going to school and living away from home and, interacting with a ton of different people and living, in the Seattle area where there's a lot of drugs and homelessness and crisis all around the street, where I was recognizing that aspect of the world. So, although I glossed over that a lot of times in a lot of episodes, just saying, yeah, I was super young and dumb. That's just me, like, double my age almost at that point in my life, and then just reflecting. But for the younger candidates, yes, absolutely. There's always stuff you can do. Even if you're living at home to save money, like housing and rental costs are nuts, right? So the responsible option might be after school. Hey, you're working, you're staying with your parents, but you could also like look for opportunities to grow more, right? You could volunteer, absolutely. Interact with some of these more challenging communities that you're going to deal with as a cop, right? So people that are unhoused, people that are struggling with substance use, like, why not find opportunities like that? Why not ask your parents how you could help with organizing the bills, right? Like, what parent wouldn't be like, yeah, like not only are you paying rent, which most, a lot of situations are like that. So you're not like removing yourself from all responsibilities. You're actually cooking, you're cleaning, you're contributing to the household. You may even take like stuff off your parents' plate and be able to speak to that. I think that would overcome a lot of hiring, suppose, decision makers to be like, okay, this isn't just some kid. Like this is
Mhm.
actually a very responsible young adult that's looking deeply into everything they can do. They're working out like crazy. They join a BJJ gym. Oh, they listen to Blue Grit Radio. Awesome. Like, let's hire them right now on the spot, right?
I love what you're saying because it's taking responsibility and it's knowing why you're doing what you're doing. A lot of what comes with emotional immaturity is this sense of, well, I want it, so give me it.
Mm-hmm.
And if, I think one of the questions I asked when I conducted these in training was, why do you want to be in law enforcement? And it seems like a simple question, and a lot of people would give a simple answer. But if you dive deep into that, it does point out to people's expectations, their motivations, and that's a thread that can run through the rest of that interview process. If this is a person who wants to make a difference, well, how are they making a difference in every other part of their life?
Yeah.
You talked about your experiences. You're not just in the fraternity. You're actively involved in taking a role and being and having responsibility for things. You talked about the painting business and these other aspects where it's not just you phoning it in,
Mm-hmm.
just being like everybody else. It's you stepping up and taking that piece of responsibility, owning it. That's what people are going to see when they're evaluating you in that process. So if you know why you want to do the job, just have that thread run throughout the rest of your life. It's an opportunity for you to really take that accountability.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to introduce another archetype of like a type of candidate, and then maybe we can wrap with a summary. But the other one's the opposite, right? So a lot of life experience. And oftentimes I hear a lot of dejected candidates that are like, man, like I made too many mistakes and no one wants to go with me, right? There's too much risk associated. And they'd rather go with the first archetype we just talked about, right? The young, like kind of clean slate because of liability. And and if anyone's listening, like don't overthink, this might not be you. It probably isn't if I've talked to you or connected with you. But so many times, even on paper, like people I never connected with in the hiring realm, like you're reading a PHQ, so a personal history questionnaire, and there's a lot of mistakes. There's illegal activity, all these things. And they may be more in like my age group, right? So like late 30s to 40s. And even in reading what they did, I have a sense that they do not have the lesson learned. And I have a sense that they have not taken ownership. And beyond ownership, and I've had this conversation too, hey, I own it. My mistake. I'll do my best. And then you don't see any evidence of that, right? So it might be arrests in their 20s, which is not a deal breaker from little misdemeanor things, teenage years, things like that. But then in the 30s and 40s, it continues to be mouthing off at work, getting disciplined at work, speeding, like these kind of innocuous things that on their own are not a huge deal, but all added together, and we're tracking it, and it's like literally following you your whole life.
Mhm.
So that's what I want to challenge with that second archetype is, have you actually taken ownership, and have you actually, as we nodded to earlier, like instilled and adjusted and are you running your life in such a way that someone from the outside would be like, oh man, all those things you did in your 20s or all that hardship you faced in your teenage years where you acted out or you really started going down a path but you course corrected, you are this fantastic man or woman because of those experiences. I can see that, and you're going to relate so well with the some of the community that we're going to interact with. Like there's a way different distinction in these two, I suppose, examples of someone that's kind of dabbled in some unsavory things or lived some harder experiences.
Yeah, the hardest part about this entire process is that we're trying to predict future behavior based
Mm,
on information that we already have. So if we're looking at somebody's past and there's not any information in there, so you're more green, younger people, then we're making a prediction hoping that because there isn't anything there, they're going to be moldable and that they can learn and it's going to be good. But we're not really jumping off from a lot of different data points. Someone that comes in and is more experienced, maybe it's second career, maybe they come from the military or whatever the version is. Um, we're looking at that past behavior and then we're using their current situation as a midpoint to be able to then predict the possibility for future performance because it is all job related, right? That's where all the recommendations are coming from. So if somebody has a past history of work difficulties, poor coworker interactions, absences, lateness, all internal affairs investigations if they worked for a different agency before, whatever the deal is. And then we ask them about their current situation and it's the same. It's pretty likely that the prediction is going to be high risk because we have 2 points in time where things have been the same.
Mhm.
It's not to say that any psychologist would think it's deterministic, meaning we don't think that you're just going to keep doing what you're doing because you did it before. But it is the best indicator we have. It's high risk. If somebody comes in and says, this happened in the past and things are different for me now, second chances are a real thing. People can change. We get that. But that's the indicator. Things used to be one way, now they're different. That's accountability. That's responsibility. It's exactly what you're speaking to. If you don't see that, it can be a problem, a real problem for applicants. And my recommendation is have people in your life that can be real with you, whether that's a friend, whether that's a family member, whether that's a mental health professional, whether, whoever it is in your life, have someone who you can say, take a good hard look at where I'm at and talk to me. What do you see? What are my opportunities? That will help give you perspective. You also have to be willing to hear the hard things. And if you're not willing to hear the hard things, that's separate.
Yeah, so well put, right? So that's something that everyone can take away. If you're an applicant or you're a new hire, you're a rookie or you're mid-career or you're retired, don't care. You need to keep growing. And the best way to do that, right? Earlier in the episode, iron sharpens iron. Like, bring in these people that make you better. The second piece of that is ask for feedback. The third piece is accept it non-defensively, right? Like, there's the promise there. If you ask for feedback from your boss or your mentor or just your family friend, your neighbor, your buddy, you need to make sure that you're actually wanting it, because that's real, myself included. You say you want feedback, but then you hear the thing you don't want to hear. You're like,
Yeah.
man, okay, I got to check my my posture and my facial expressions right now, because I did ask for this, and they are very caring and kind for providing it. Okay, yeah. Well, we could go on and on, but I do want to I think we gave the listeners a lot to think about, and hopefully, although we gave you all this info, hopefully, again, the goal is to relax and like just let yourself absorb that, and then contextualize. Okay, I just got to be me, and that's the best way that I can make sure this is a good fit. I mean, just to inject it, like, we've had people that are new cops and then they realized this was not a good fit really early on, like literally out of academy, hit the streets in like first week or two. They're like, nope, thank you. And it's like, man, like, that's,
Mhm.
and from the agency perspective, of course, a lot of money, and that sucks. But for the candidate, man, like, you've been wrapping your head around this, and like, it's a life change, and you may have gotten in a lot of kind of mental angst, like going through it, like telling your family you're doing this, telling your significant other, or that you're doing this thing, and then all of a sudden you're not. So be
Yeah.
real with it. And then, like, I like to think that things work out as they should if you present effectively and honestly.
Yeah. And what I will also say, to your point, I agree with everything you said, is just, it's an exciting time. If this is a job that you're looking forward to, that you want to do, put your effort into that, show up, be excited, um, show your best, but really do your homework to make sure that it's something that you want to do. Because as you pointed out, it is an investment. You're going to spend money, you're going to spend time, you're going to get people in your life adjusting to the idea that you're going to go into this profession. An agency is going to invest a lot into you with the academy time. And for you to find out along the way that that wasn't really what you wanted, I think some of that is preventable. Go on a ride along. A lot of agencies have explorer programs or reserve programs where you can put in a little bit of effort on the back end without being, fully involved in that career process. So just do the homework. Make sure it's where you want to go. Stay excited about it. And if you want it to happen, you're putting effort there, it's likely to happen.
Yeah, I love it. So many tangible takeaways. If you haven't listened to all the episodes of Blue Grit Radio, start there, because it's real talk, right? Like, it's not just the fluffy, awesome, like, badass stories. It's like the hard stuff and the uncomfortable stuff, like family dynamics, off-duty considerations, and also, like, follow Dr. Jenna and, like, get your head wrapped around this thing, like, act as if. So if you are going to be a cop, like, recognize how you want to build up all these wellness mechanisms so that you are the most resilient, the most gritty person you can be to adapt to all that stuff, which is a huge theme here. So, Dr. Jenna, I want to thank you so much for coming on, spouting all this wisdom. Can you please share with us where people can find you, find your content, and learn more?
Yeah, thanks for having me on the podcast. And if anybody wants to continue following, I post a lot of educational content every once in a while, some inspiration to go get a workout in.
Yes.
You can find me on Instagram at doc.jena.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.